Really insidious thing about violent extremist ideology. You are attracted to this because you're hurting. You're attracted to this ideology, and the ideology tells you you're a warrior for your people, whoever your people are.
The problem with suicidal thoughts is how intense they are. It feels like they will never end. And when you're in that, you have this kind of tunnel vision. It feels like it's going to last forever.
Majority of people look at a homeless person. They're a drug addict. They made bad choices. If homelessness was a punishment for bad choices, we'd all be homeless.
The women that are struggling, that gives the blowjob at $5, this for me is pure 100% exploitation.
I stabbed my wife 3 times one night because she wouldn't let me finish my bottle of vodka. Still not thinking I had a drink problem.
Ultimately, 1 in 2 Americans will experience family estrangement. So that's 50% of the population.
To be completely honest with you, I am a refugee, but I'm not just a refugee.
Because I am George. I'm not George with Down syndrome or Down's George, because that's not me.
Welcome to Purposeful Empathy, a show that is dedicated to amplifying the voices of people from across the globe who understand the world needs more empathy and are doing something about it. This season will inspire you to empathize with people who are regularly marginalized and misunderstood. You won't want to miss a single episode, so hit the subscribe button now. Thanks for watching and enjoy the show.
If you have someone in your family that is going through this, you need to let go of your own beliefs, of your own thoughts, sit down and see the human being in front of you telling you, this is what is going on. I am hurting. I think it's a cry for help. And I think the biggest mistake that people do when others are coming forward with the information is that they're not listening. They're judging. And when you do that, I feel like it's a wave that goes around society. And that's why impunity exists. It's because you don't sit to listen. You just sit to make a judgment. And I think I would say that's my advice. Sit and listen.
Welcome to a new episode of Purposeful Empathy. Today, I'm joined by María Juliana Prieto Gracía, a Colombian human rights lawyer, refugee advocate, human trafficking specialist, and fierce champion for gender justice. With lived experience as a refugee and a background in advocating for women's legal and reproductive rights, Maria has supported women affected by gender-based violence, sexual exploitation, and human trafficking for many years in the nonprofit sector. As a mixed Indigenous Black woman and member of the Two-Spirit LGBTQI community, Maria's intersectional advocacy amplifies the voices of those who are too often silenced. She was recently awarded the Amino Malco Fund by the Canadian Council for Refugees and will be representing refugee lived experience at the UN CRCP 2025 meeting in Geneva. This season, I am shining a spotlight on people who often feel marginalized or misunderstood. And through each conversation, my goal is to better understand different lived experiences in order to widen our circle of empathy. Given her deep commitment to defending the rights of women affected by human trafficking and sexual exploitation, I've invited Maria Juliana to share her insights on advocacy, protection, and the urgent need to amplify the voices of survivors and refugee people. Welcome to the show, Maria.
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm so excited.
Me too, I'm so excited. It's been a really amazing odyssey through this entire season. I have to say, I've learned so much and it's really pulling at my empathy strings. I thought, you know what, I look forward for other people to learn, but I'm like, I have to start with me, and I certainly have learned a lot. I think the best place to start is the human story. So, very impressive bio, a lawyer working for years, advocating on behalf of others, but with lived experience. I wonder if you might share a little bit up front about yourself, any twists and turns, any stories that you feel that you want to share that might add some extra color to who you are besides the bio?
So I was born in Colombia in 1996, and my family comes from two very particular backgrounds. My mom's side is indigenous and my dad's side is Black. But the way they intersect is very interesting because in Colombia, even though there's racism, the way we see each other is much different. Like the segregation works a different, I would say, way when you start doing relations with other people. And so my family was affected by the armed conflict. At the time, well, going back a little bit in the history of Colombia, there were two huge groups that were fighting against each other, and it's guerrilla, FARC, and then paramilitary, which kind of affected the way my family developed in society. So my sister, actually, she's also a refugee. We are not from the same dad, but we share the same mom. And she moved to Canada at the age of 13 because her dad was a politician and the guerrilla of Las FARC was going against him. So they had to seek asylum here in Canada. So after that, there were many other kind of like events that happened in my family that led us to distance ourselves. My dad almost got kidnapped by the guerrilla as well. Various of my uncles and aunties were either kidnapped, killed, or raped. So we came from a very small town in Granada Meta, which is a very isolated region, really, in Colombia, who was very much impacted by the violence and the armed conflict. So I think my story really started there, even though I was very young to understand what was going on. I think when I saw everything that was going on and started to learn the experiences also of the women in my family, both of my grandmas were married as minors, and they were abused as well, sexually and physically, economically and emotionally. So when I started learning or these like patriarchal patterns that were going around my family, I started to question what was my role within my own family. And after that, I started like, of course, developing myself, growing. And then in school, sadly, I was raped for 3 years by my classmates. And when my dad made the claim, nothing happened. So I started building so much rage within myself, within not being listened, within not being heard by adults that are supposed to protect me, but they left me alone for three entire years, at the hands of like pervert men, also young men, because at the time, social media was starting, sites were starting, pornography started become, well, it's always been there, but now it became much mainstream. And sadly, for most of the men, this is the first contact they have with sexual relations, and it's a very toxic one. So I was like, while I was bullied because I was getting developed faster than my other peers, female peers, they were sexually abusing me. I tried to kill myself at the age of 13. And my mom and my dad didn't know much more of what was happening because I was too scared of letting them know what was going on, really. And when I did the first attempt and my parents called the school and kind of like laid out what was going on, the response of, at the time, the female director, she was like, well, lose weight, make your hair grow, because I used to bite my nails. Put some fake nails on your nails. Start working out, start acting more feminine, and this kind of patterns that I was like, but why do I have to follow these strict rules in femininity, but my peers are not being questioned on why they are sexually abusing me? So I started again building more and more rage, and I developed something called borderline personality disorder. So there is no cure for this personality disorder, sadly, but I became much more sensitive and aware to my surroundings. So it made me understand that I needed to be more, not for everyone, but for myself. I needed to understand what was my role with me as a woman, as a female. So I left my school and I entered university, and sadly, I was again abused and fell pregnant. And in Colombia at the time, it was illegal to get a pregnancy, except if you complied with like three specific reasons. And because I already had borderline personality disorder, the state was like, okay, you know what? We will let you have an abortion, but you will have to pay for it. So I had to pay for it, and it was a very painful process. Um, I am grateful because that was like, I think that was the eye opening for me. That was in 2017. And I said, okay, there is clearly a pattern going on with the women on my life, but also on myself. I need to understand how can I break it. So from the moment I had my abortion, I decided to join the sexual reproductive activism of my university. It was a group made of other girls who faced similar situations. I shaved my head, I changed my clothes, I changed the way I looked. I started acting more rebellious and everything because that was a way to say I'm against all these norms. I'm against gender norms in general. So I did that, and I started advocacy in a way that was much more stronger and make my story be known and heard as a child who was abused, as a child who fell on a pregnancy that I didn't want, and also that I was very pressured to keep because of religious morals, that I was stopped more than once in the abortion center by religious people telling me that I was killing someone, that I will go to hell for killing someone. And that just took a huge toll on my heart. And I said, I need to take a step back and kind of like understand. So from that moment on, I started my activism. And it first started with sexual reproductive rights, and then it moved to gender-based violence in general. Then after I decided to pursue human trafficking and sexual exploitation, and currently now I'm doing refugee advocacy.
I want to take all of that in for a second. Thank you for sharing all of that, and I'm deeply sorry that you've had to experience all of that. That sounds like quite a journey you've been on.
Yeah, it was very painful.
How are you doing today?
I'm good. I think talking about this makes it every time it makes it less hard, but it's still hard. It's my voice still breaks because I think of that little girl, and I'm like, I know I'm not the only one on the first one, but it still hurts that it was me. Still hurts that I think what still hurts about this whole background of myself and my humanity is the fact that these men right now are walking freely. These men right now develop their lives like if nothing happened. But I am still recovering. I'm still taking the pieces that were broken and trying to fix and make something out of it, something that helps other people go through what they might be experiencing that I already experienced. So yeah, I don't think it would ever get easy, but I think the more I talk about it and the more I work on it to, of course, prevent this type of violences, it helps me make a meaning of what happened to me. Now, I don't ask why it happened to me. I said, I'm happy it happened because it opened my eyes. And it's a reality that I need to talk about. It's a reality that I need to let others know about so they understand that context and socialization, like the country you are born on, and the context and the rules and the patriarchal settings are so similar in other places of the world that it's important to talk about these dynamics. So yeah, it's still hard, but I'm happy I'm doing it and I will keep doing it as long as people keep opening the doors for me to talk about it. Yes.
Well, you sound like a fierce warrior, doing the advocacy, coming from such a place of your own personal resilience and strength. I'm still reverberating from everything you shared, and it certainly adds depth to everything we're going to talk about. So thank you for sharing that. And I think before I move to a next question, as a final thought, since you've just shared, if there's anyone who's listening who might need to hear a message today, either a survivor or maybe a parent or a sibling of a survivor, what might you want to say?
Oh my God, please listen. I don't think so. Here's my take on this. People always think that there are two parts to be listened to the story, and in certain aspects, I would agree. But sexual violences and gender-based violence, it's such a delicate topic that I always say, listen first. You need to listen to what the human person is telling you, not the things you understand of this human being. Listen to the human being itself. It's trying to communicate with you something that is deeply hard and vulnerable and still hurting. And for me, I personally believe that believing the victim even before the proof has showed up that this person either was lying or not, I feel like that's much better than start questioning if the person is right or wrong. If you have someone in your family that is going through this, you need to let go of your own beliefs, of your own thoughts, sit down and see the human being in front of you telling you this is what is going on. I am hurting. I think it's a cry for help. And I think the biggest mistake that people do when others are coming forward with the information is that they're not listening. They're judging. And when you do that, I feel like it's a wave that goes around society, and that's why impunity exists. It's because you don't sit to listen, you just sit to make a judgment. And I think I would say that's my advice. Sit and listen.
Mm. Excellent. So the call to action right now, people watching and listening this conversation, is let's lean into the listening, and I am ready to do that. So I wonder, Maria Juliana, can you share a moment in your advocacy work when you connected deeply with someone's experience, whether it's a refugee, someone trafficked, someone who has been exploited, something that reshaped or reaffirmed your sense of purpose?
So I think there were three moments where I was like, oh my, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. I just want to keep helping people. So the first one was when I did my abortion just recently. I think it was a few months later. I started getting calls from newspaper and media to talk about what was going on because there was already a movement trying to change the law in Colombia to make abortion accessible to all. And it was the first moment I realized people were actually listening to me. I felt so strong, and not only because I was being asked to talk about it, but also because of the women who were around me. I never felt such a powerful energy because I said, all these women are here to support me. They don't even know me, but they want to hear what I have to say. And I was privileged in Colombia because my dad was such a well, he still is because he's still alive. He's such a hardworking man. He came out of poverty and built himself this whole new life that I was able to profit from. And people still wanted to hear what I had to say. And that was the first moment I said, my voice matters, not only as someone who went through the system trying to get an abortion, but also as a female. So that for me was shocking. And I was like, oh my God, people are really ready to listen to me. So that was one of the things that shook me to the core. The second one is when I started working in human trafficking and sexual exploitation. My boss, actually, she's a survivor of the armed conflict and sexual exploitation. And doing work with her showed me how powerful advocacy is, how powerful fighting for each other is. And she used to say something that was so, at first I was like, yeah, I don't think that's entirely true. But she would say, women are the only ones who will liberate other women. And at first, when you hear that, you're like, no, but we're in society, men should always contribute. But the more I was looking at the work she was doing, the more I was looking at the advocacy she was doing, the field work she was doing as a survivor of sexual exploitation, the more I understood that it is true. Like we as women are the only ones who are gonna save ourselves. And she shifted a lot of perspectives I had on how sex works and everything. And for me, because of my lived experience and what I went with her, I don't believe in sex work. I think every form of sexual exploitation is in fact exploitation. And that shaped me in a way to see other women that are in the field as humans. And that is such a hard way to do it because like we were talking at the beginning, is such a transactional aspect of the female body. I was able to, even within myself, find empathy about it and find resilience within these women that are still working on the sexual exploitation field. And I am very careful with the language because for me, even if you choose to be sexually exploited, there is a system that is willing to oppress you within like the demand. So we say, if there was no demand, there will be no need for women to sell their bodies. So for me, it was like, wow, this is such an eye-opening moment. And just having contact with someone who understood how violent men could be towards a female body, it just moved me into so many ways that I said, I can't allow other women to think that this could be a choice. Not even allow. I want to advocate for them to find other ways that they can survive, especially because within refugees, some of them could be and are potentially human trafficked or sexually exploited, but the governments have different approach to this. Some of them could access the refugee system. Some of them get a special work permit to be able to integrate in a new country. But there's also like this whole underground business of narco traffic, drug trafficking as well, armed trafficking as well, that just combines itself. And it's very hard to do yeah, to differentiate if one is good and the other is not, just because of the same environment it is in. But yeah, she for me is one of my idols, I would say, and she's still doing field work in Colombia. They try to kill her many times, but she still survived. And for me, that was one of the biggest experiences of resilience that I have ever had in my life, and I love her, and I hopefully will be able to help her even more when I'm fully settled in here. So that is like my second experience. And for the third one, when I arrived in here, mainly for the refugee lived experience, I did my process all by myself. I represented myself on my hearing, and I got myself my own refugee status. And for me, that was a game. An award for myself, because I was able to prove to myself that I'm not only smart, I am very disciplined and I am determined, and that I believed that I needed to be given the opportunity to have a new life and not be killed because I was trying to help other women escape this world of profound violence. And at the same time, while I was doing some of my work, I was able to um, make the government of Canada listen. So some of the policies changed because I did a workshop on how females were treated when they were going through the refugee process. And that was a very powerful tool for me to understand that, again, my voice really matters. And for those who are voiceless, the least I could do is provide them with the responsibility of talking. I believe that me holding this space and not using it for the purpose of others who cannot talk is a mistake. And that's why I decided to make myself an advocate to not only other females who are going through sexual violence, gender-based violence, sexual reproductive violence, and then human trafficking, but also refugees. And I have been able to prepare many people who were misled by fake lawyers, bad lawyers who were not in touch with them, to prepare their hearings. And I could say gladly, the people who I helped prepare themselves to do their own hearings, all of them right now hold refugee accepted status. So that was one of the peaks that I am so proud of, and I really want to continue to do this till the end.
How long have you been in Canada?
3 years and a half.
Years. That's great. Wow, we're happy to have you.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Now, before jumping on the call with you, I did a little bit of research. So this is some stats about what's going on in the world as it pertains to these areas of expertise that you have. So it said that estimating the exact number of women worldwide who are survivors of sexual exploitation or human trafficking is actually really challenging, because it's a sort of like clandestine and the crimes are sort of kept under wraps. But that said, I came across two reports. So in 2016, that's still 9 years ago, by the International Labor Organization, they estimate that there's approximately 5 million victims of sex trafficking globally. I imagine the number is much higher after 2016. I also came across Stacked Odds, which is a report published in 2020, so a little bit more recently, by an organization called Walk Free. It does human rights work sort of to help end modern day slavery. And that report says that girls account for 99% of all victims of forced sexual exploitation and 84% of all victims of forced marriage. So that's on the sexual exploitation front. Then I also discovered that as of mid-2024, which I guess is the most recent set of numbers, the UNHCR, so the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, reports that there's approximately 43.7 million refugees worldwide. which is literally about the same population as Canada. And in total, they estimate like 122, 123 million people who have been forcibly displaced. And that encompasses refugees, asylum seekers, internally displaced people, and others who have just been compelled to flee their homes because of conflict, persecution, or violence. And I imagine that we're going to have climate refugees in large numbers entering that as well. So to me, like these stats sort of underscore the widespread nature of this problem and the critical need for international support and really comprehensive solutions. So I don't know. I thought an interesting question might be with that as the backdrop. Like if you had a microphone, you're an advocate, right? If you had a microphone and could blare into some station that every person, every adult, let's say on the planet could hear, what would you want to say?
Wow, that's very interesting. Well, do you want me to divide it in two responses, one for sexual exploitation and the other one for refugees?
Sure.
Okay, perfect. So for the first one, I think I would say, and I'm saying this obviously as someone who has been a survivor of sexual violence, and I call myself survivor because I'm not a victim anymore. I make myself strong enough to understand that I survived the violence I went through. But if I were to talk to others about the topic, I would say, first of all, I would pose the question, why can you see women as human beings? I think that's a huge, strong question to ask, because when you think about human trafficking and you think about sexual exploitation, all you see is women being treated as monetary objects to be able to do transactions with. And I would say, what is on the line that doesn't allow you to understand that we are human beings? You think that we deserve to be raped many times on a day? Do you think it's fair for other men to have the right to pay to access my body? Do you feel that is correct that minors are walking on the streets offering sexual services to an adult? Those are questions that for me are rooted in misogyny. And because of that, because of the statistics that you mentioned, I think there's something on the context of Colombia that is very important and that is missing, and is that the people who also inflict this violence are family members. We have mothers that are willing to sell their daughters to human traffickers because the marginalization, the racism, the segregation is so big in Colombia, they cannot even make it through 1 month paycheck because it's not enough to pay for groceries, to pay for a house, even a room. So I feel that this is a field that needs a lot of sensitivity. It needs a lot of empathy from people who are strong enough to understand that we are not products. I have the right to stand on my feet and say, I don't want to be sexually exploited. There's a beautiful but a strong, strong book from a survivor from Argentina. Her name is Sonia. And it says, every woman can become a whore. Why? Because men have such a rooted misogyny mentality that any woman that they see on the street can be potentially exploited. If you decide as a man that this is the woman you want to have sexual relations to and she says no, you either kidnap her, you either rape her, you kill her, or you actually let her become your sexual slave. And that's something that happens between the field a lot. And again, my question is, why can you see us as human beings? Is it so hard for you to understand that we also have feelings, that the things that happen on our body are similar to someone that goes to war? PTSD is so strong in survivors of sexual exploitation that it can lead to suicide. It can lead to hysterectomy because of the pain that the uterus has been feeling for all these constant raping every day, every time. It's so intense that I I just I just feel a little bit of frustration as well because men don't question themselves. Why am I consuming pornography? Why am I consuming webcamming? Why am I consuming women? Why do cities have a red zone so females are portrayed as a piece of meat that you go buy and eat, literally? So, on that sense, I feel like this mic that you have given me is to also portray the harsh realities that women go through when there's sexual exploitation and human trafficking involved. Nobody talks about the aftermath. What happens when the woman gets pregnant and the pregnancy they wish is not a girl, because if it's a girl, once the girl is born and she's old enough, meaning old enough could be 6 years old, will start to be sexually exploited alongside with the mom. And men will never question themselves. Is this woman doing okay? Is this woman taking drugs to go by the day so they can serve me and other men? Is this child consenting? Because there's no consent on a child to be sexually exploited. As you mentioned, 99% of the girls who enter the field and are forcibly in the field are exploited. And there's a big misconception on what human trafficking is. Most of the people think is that someone entered abruptly on the house, put a gun on your head and said, "I'm gonna kidnap you." That's not how it works. Human trafficking also looks like someone taking a fake offer. Also looks like someone trying to survive and these fake promises like, "Oh, you're just gonna go work on a bar." And technically you do go to work on a bar. But then what happens? Your passport gets stolen, well, taken really. You start having these crazy debts that you are never gonna be able to pay. And it's so sad because people think that human trafficking is something that happens overseas, so that the women has to leave their country of origin to be trafficked in another place. That's not how it works. The law literally says it's the movement from one place to another to sexually exploit someone. So human trafficking is also happening on the country of origin. Just that this woman is picked up on a corner and is moved to a motel to sexually exploit her, that's already human trafficking. And the choice of the woman doesn't matter. She can say no and still she's gonna be exploited. She can say, "I don't wanna do these certain things." But you still are gonna require it to do because you already paid for that service and you're supposed to open yourself to all possibilities when you accept to be paid.
Yeah.
So for me, it's also on the side of men thinking, why do you deserve to have sex? I don't think sex is something that has to be given to you just because you were born a male or a man and you were socialized as that. And this is a question that you should ask yourself. If you had a daughter, if your mom that is currently alive has to be trafficked or has to be sexually exploited, how would you react? Would you not see the human being on her? You say, my mom would never go through that situation. That's the thing, you don't know. Because as Sonia told on her book, every woman can become a whore. Because any man can inflict sexual violence and any man could potentially be a consumer or an exploitator.
Now, so I hear the righteous anger in the question, in the rhetorical question, do you not see our humanity? I wonder if we dipped into the softer part of who we are and asked that same rhetorical question without the anger, even though the anger is justified, but asked from a place of sorrow, because I believe I did an interview recently with a man who is a former neo-Nazi and now works to de-radicalize people across all different dimensions of hate. He says that hurt people hurt people. And so I just wonder from a different place, if you ask the question, do you not see our humanity? What comes up for you?
If it was sorrow, I would say probably someone didn't see that, like, or saw their humanity on them too. I feel like, although for me, there's no kind of excuse why men cannot get educated and stop exploiting women. I do understand that there is a system that has been put in place that makes them feel like they have to act like a matchman. And I think that getting yourself out of that narrative, it's not only gonna be helpful for when you start relationships with women, but with yourself. I feel like it's much better when a man is in touch with their emotions and understand the conflict that goes within himself than a man that just decides to take on the world just because the world made him the way he is. And I like that you said that hurt people because I think it's true. But also, I have seen that some people don't have to be hurt to inflict violence. And I think even from that place of sorrow, I would even say maybe let's see that humanity from a perspective of equality or equity more. If
Yeah,
you, yeah, go ahead.
I
If
didn't
you
want to judge you.
if you believe yourself to be a man valuable of the highest awards in the world, the highest knowledge, the highest opportunities you can get, then think of a woman of the most valuable person, the highest person for getting opportunities, the highest person for qualities by itself. And I think then that could be a narrative that can come not from rage but from understanding equity.
Absolutely. And I also think when you reflected back my words, which were reflecting back his words, it occurred to me also that the women who have been exploited are also hurt and are not necessarily hurting others. So there is a way of breaking that pattern that hurt people don't have to hurt other people, right? So I think that that's worth also underscoring. Um, I want to talk about refugees as well because I want to give you the mic. Um, Feel free to say whatever you want to say, but I also wonder if you could speak to what do you think people don't understand, misunderstand about refugees?
So first of all, I would like to highlight that the word refugees, it can mean so many things, but the way that people have used it for political purposes has showcased a different aspect of what the word means. So we like to use refugee people because it's a way of not giving a stamp on someone. Because before this person was a refugee, this person was a human being, this person was a mother, this person was a father, this person was something else than just that stamp. And I think that's very important to showcase when all these anti-immigration narrative that is happening right now, anti-refugee narrative is happening right now. It's because people always think that refugees are always in the worst conditions ever. They are always coming from a very violent context in situation of war or forced displacement, that they were doing something bad, so they had to flee their country, that there is dictatorship on their countries of origin. And I think that's just a little bit of what being a refugee means. There's refugees like me who had to flee for political reasons that not necessarily mean that I was in the worst situation economically, like that I was so bad I was starving, and this just creates like this, how can I say it in English? It's like there's a specific like pity. That's the word. You create pity on others because you think that refugees, or mainly people think that refugees are just these super vulnerable people that don't have voices, that are not strong enough, that are uneducated. I think that's one of the biggest mistakes people make when they talk about refugees. It's people that never seen any other like panorama of their life but besides war. And for me, it's like, no, sit down and listen to what that refugee person is gonna talk to you about. Before I became a refugee, I was already an activist. I was already a lawyer. I was already doing these many things. I was educated. I am educated. I'm educating myself every day. And just because I don't look like a refugee would normally look, which this also comes with a symbolic violence, which is very common in journalism when they go to precarious places and start snapping photos and says, this is what a refugee must look like. And they get into shock when not all of us look like that. And it's nothing bad that they do look like they do, because that's a reality. That's another side of refugees, that it's real. But then comes to a point also where people just tend to not give opportunities to this kind of people to express themselves, and they always comes with the ignorance and surprise that refugees don't study, refugees don't know how to read, don't know how to talk, don't know how to write. And for me, that is a huge misconception of what it means to be in this world of refugees. I see brilliant minds that flee war, brilliant minds that were on governments and they had to flee, brilliant minds that, like me, were social leaders and had to leave, brilliant minds that left dictatorship as well. But that's just, we're so different in so many ways. And people totally underestimate what being a refugee like states by itself.
Yeah.
And they don't see that given that title is just a way of letting us know that we have to be much more resilient, that we have to be much more powerful. And to be completely honest with you, I am a refugee, but I'm not just a refugee.
Yeah.
And I think part of where my advocacy comes from is that I refuse completely to let myself be just that.
Yeah.
And what other refugee people are working on is to remove that narrative from those who have power to tell the story of those who have not lived it, or those who have lived it more so, and regain our own sense of worth and start telling other people, you don't know what we are. I'm here to educate you and let you know what we actually are. So that's what I would say.
Yeah, I really like the reframe because there's dignity, there's humanity, there's agency attached to all of that. I mean, before we got on the call, I was thinking I'd heard you use the term refugee person as opposed to refugee, and it made me think of the distinction between homelessness and the unhoused, right? Homelessness implies a personal deficiency. Unhoused is a systemic failure. And that subtle shift really helps to humanize people and reduce prejudice and foster more compassion. So I like the idea of using the frame a refugee person because there's so much more complexity than just that one identifier. And that identifier tends to carry a lot of baggage and bias that is I have 3 questions and we're running the clock. I'm so sorry, but we're going to try to get there. I want to just ask because this moment seems like we can't do this interview without actually talking about what's happening south of the border. Given your lived experience, given your advocacy work, human rights, you're a lawyer. I'm just wondering, you must daily walk up sort of like mind blown a little bit about what's happening in the democracy that is the United States these days. If you have a comment.
Yeah, oh my God. I have so many comments. So first of all, I understand what going through the border feels like because that's how I arrived in Canada. I came through the border, and there is something called Safe Third Country Agreement or STCA. This is an agreement made between United States and Canada that says if you landed on United States, you have to ask for refuge on the States because Canada considers United States to be a safe third country. Now, there are huge problems with this treaty that was made between these two nations because it has shown that with the re-election of Trump, there's a lot of violations of human rights, especially with the detentions from IC to immigrants, people that are refugees, protected or asylum claimants, even their own nationals born in the territory of United States. So I can talk to you about my experience at the border wasn't the best, but there are certain conditions from the STCA that you can meet. So you are able to enter Canadian soil and ask for asylum. So because as I mentioned in the beginning, my sister was already a refugee here and she went through the whole process and became a citizen. One of the conditions is that you have someone in the Canadian territory that is from your close family nucleus who already holds either a permanent residency or a citizenship. So my sister in many ways saved my coming through Canada because it would have been much difficult to not being able to make it and send back to the States. Now, I know that the border in Canada is brutal, but it's not compared to what happens at the border on the States. People just get like their human rights violations are so it's so I don't even know what word could actually emphasize the terrible things that I have seen that people come to me and tell me that we have been able to witness, especially on my organization, because I do get emails from people who their partners were captured by IC and now have been on isolation for 1 month, 6 months. I think the USA brutality is much more stronger, but I'm not gonna say that Canada doesn't hold those same colonial values because it does. I spent 9 hours on the border. The treatment was a little bit hard, to be honest with you. You're seeking for safety, and the first thing you expect is an officer that is bringing you a little bit of warmth after all that you've went through. And is a shock to see how detached of their humanity these officers are, because for them this is like daily rotation, daily basis work. But it's so sad for them to not see beyond the person who is just asking for assistance and a safe country to be and work and live and just develop themselves. That for me, that was one of the most heartbreaking things. And I will never forget when they were opening my bags, because I come from Colombia and that has a stigma. People always think it's drug dealing. It has a strong stigma when you come to the border. And this officer opened my bags and I said, "You can check everything you like." And he stopped me right then and he said, "I'm gonna check everything I want. I don't need your permission." That's exactly what he said to me, and those words will never leave my brain. And I just remember sitting on the waiting room. Like, I am a very outgoing person. My body changed. I grabbed my arms and I put my head down like if someone was putting so much pressure on myself that I just suddenly became so submissive. So anything they were asking me, yes, of course. Yes, I understand. Yes, don't worry. And when they were asking me about my tattoos, the way they also said it was like, "Were you on a gang? Because we need to know if you had a criminal background back home." And I said, "I've never belonged to a gang." And they said, "Well, you have a net tattoo, and that belongs to Salvatruchas, which is a gang in El Salvador that is very, 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 very dangerous." And they were profiling me already when I arrived here. And for me, was such a shocking experience. And the fact that like they don't have spaces prepared for when people cross the border. They make you sleep on the floor. And technically, not that there is something wrong about it. It's more like the way they tell you, like, "There's no place for you, go sleep on the floor." Or they make you sit on like this chair in front of a security camera, as if you were gonna escape, as if you were gonna become violent. And it's literally one chair in front of the security cameras and officers on one side and on the other. Like if I was in custody because I commit like a heinous crime. And all I was doing is asking, literally, it's so hard to say, but people don't realize that sometimes we're asking for literal mercy. "Please help me. I'm in danger. I left everything I've known to find a place to find security." And I know my experience is not even worse because in the border, when they're not able to identify you or prove your identity, either with family members, with your paperwork, if you had two passports that had two different names, you're gonna be sent to the detention center. And the treatment is similar as if people were jailed. And it's such a sad experience. And I know it's not the worst for my case, but I know for a fact that what's going on the States is completely a human rights violation. People are not being able to seek asylum unless they meet the three criteria. There are United States nationals that are trying to cross the border, specifically from the 2S LGBTQI plus community, because Trump has decided to attack their human rights, their livelihood, their existence. And it's just so hard because even people who were recognized refugee protected status are getting detained as well. So we have this huge narrative that is anti-refugees, anti-immigrants in Canada. I mean, I am so grateful to this country for many, many, many reasons, but I can tell you humanly, as Maria Juliana, I think Canada is not doing enough to recognize the state of politics in the United States that is letting people flee for their lives. Because you see the videos and it's shocking. So I I just wish there was a little bit more of understanding. This is why I do believe refugee lived experience is so important when crossing the border, because these people are effectively seeking asylum. That's what they want. And some of them successfully are able to cross the border, disappear for 15 days, which is even crazy to me, and then ask for asylum later. Like, what is that law even about? What do you mean I have to disappear for 15 days to then come and ask for asylum in Canada? So it's very sad to see that. And of course, children are getting separated by IC, and there's so much uncertainty. and of course, like with trying to doing sponsorships and everything related to people who are looking for protection in the States, the program is paused in Canada and in Quebec. That's the reality of it. So even if we wanted to do something about it, we can't because the government said we're gonna put a pause on it. It's too much. But at the same time, you see people getting, there's people dying on the border too. So I guess their efforts to protect human rights on that part are not being very, very effective.
So that, of course, elicits my penultimate question around what role empathy plays in all of this.
Well, I think truly my story is not even the most gut-wrenching one, and I acknowledge that. And because I understand that, I have been able to open my heart to other stories that are even more heartbreaking and has provided me with empathy for sure. I even had so many misconceptions, for example, about Muslim people in general, that coming here opened my eyes to a whole new civilization, a whole new understanding of what it means to be someone protected. And I personally have opened myself to empathy, to stories that I don't recognize myself in, but at the end of the day, as them, I am still a refugee. So in that part, we intersect, and in that part, we understand each other. And for me, being able to see the humanity before anything else, before any misconception, any media outlet that is wrong, any politic that is xenophobic and targeting immigrants, I see the strength of people that are not like me, but that shared so many things with me. And it has opened my eyes to even shape, if the time comes and I'm safe again to go back to Colombia, to even reshape my own country. I feel like empathy is such a powerful tool to even, I would say, even relax and stop thinking 1000% all the time, and just understand that other realities are as valid as mine, and other realities need much, much attention, such as like mine. And I feel also that this job that I'm doing right now, getting to meet other people from other cultural backgrounds, other places, in religion, in food, in celebrations, in culture, just in general, has allowed me to understand my roots even more, and how important is to preserve my identity as an indigenous Black woman, but also my identity as a Colombian. Doesn't matter if technically I'm not Colombian anymore because of my status, but before politics, before everything, there's a culture within me that flows, that are on my veins, that it shows on my body, on my face features, on the way I talk, on my accent, on everything that I am, that I could not have been able to find that without empathy, without listening to others, without understanding experiences on others, but mainly to see myself in other women who are not me, who were raised in different contexts. But at the end of the day, want the liberation for all women, doesn't matter where, and it's just beautiful in its all.
I love it. Wow, spokesperson for empathy. I like call myself an empathy evangelist. Looks like you're right there with me. Maria Juliana, our last question, and thank you so much for all the time that we've spent together. I like to close my podcast conversations with the same question, and that is if you can think of a moment in your life when you were on the receiving end of empathy and what that meant for you.
on the receiving end of empathy. Wow, there is one moment that I was a receiver of empathy that actually I didn't think I was good enough for it, really. And it came across. So when I started working at Acción Refugee Montréal, I was desperate to find a job, really desperate to find a job and find a place to fit in. And she passed away recently, Jenny Jeans. And in so many ways, I was a receiver of her empathy, and it makes me so vulnerable because we didn't know each other for so long, but there were moments. So there was this specific time where there was a march on the border at Roxham Road. I think it was my second event with Action Refugee Montréal. And I wanted to speak about the reality of closing the border because the Canadian government at the time had closed the border. And I wanted to give my experience a little bit because I crossed the border. And I spoke about it. I was shaking. I was like so moved by other people talking about the importance of listening to refugees and protecting refugees and welcoming refugees that I just remember once I gave my microphone away after telling this story, and people were looking at me like, oh my God, your story really touched me. She put her arm on my back, and I think that was one of the moments where I said, oh my God, I'm safe. I think that was like, she was so beautiful to me. She saw me that day with eyes that of course I've met those eyes before now, but for my first experience as someone who just arrived to an organization that had this many history and she was there for 20 years plus, to put my hand on the back after giving my testimony of some of the things that I went through when I came to Canada and see her eyes lighting up, being like, I listen to you and I welcome you. For me, that was like, oh my God. Of course, there's a lot of bias within white people that we brown people have, especially when you're mixed and all these. There's so many intersectionalities that affect you, but to see someone be so moved by refugees, and like I said, I wasn't even that close to her, but her being that person that kind of like gave me the strength to continue talking and showed me empathy. I i i would never forget that image. And like there was someone with the Colombian flag next to her, and it was such a wholesome moment. And I hope wherever she is right now that she has found peace, because she was a wonderful human being. And I think that was like really the first time I received through empathy from a white Canadian person. And it made me feel that like we definitely have to do this together. And she was such a lovely human being. And I'm so happy that she was the first person I have this strong memory from, someone that I understand had more privilege than me, but still welcomed me with open arms.
Well, I love ending the conversations with this question because I never know what I'm going to hear. I'm often very moved by the stories. The gift you've given in sharing it is I can feel the imprint of a hand on my back, the way you described it. And I hope everybody who's watching and listening will feel the slight tender pressure of a hand on your back and be reminded that it's easy, it's simple to extend empathy, and we need to do a lot more of it in the world.
I agree. I agree. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to talk. I feel so much better. After doing this, I just feel so much better.
Well, that's great news for me. I want to thank you for all that you're doing, and I want to thank everyone who's watching and listening. This season has been the most profound of all my podcasts. I hope you will subscribe and listen to all of season 19. Incredible stories. Thank you, Maria Juliana. Gracias.
De nada. My pleasure.
Thank you all for watching and listening. We'll see you next week at Purposeful Empathy.
If you know someone who would benefit from this episode, please share it with them now. Post the link to your socials, and don't forget to hit the subscribe button. The world needs more empathy, and you have an important role to play.